Hello, this is Sharon Mistretta, and this is a tutorial on MIT App Inventor as to how to implement a slider and based on the number produced by that slider, then act upon it and display information based on that number on a button click. So let's discover how this works. During my office hours this week, I had talked to the teachers about implementing different types of apps according to their curriculum. And one of the teachers had specifically asked about something that she would be able to do when she was covering volcanoes with her class. So this is an example of how to implement an app that talks about and that speaks to the 10 most dangerous volcanoes in America. So what I did was I looked up information on, happens to be on National Geographic, America's 10 most dangerous volcanoes. And this is the app, the resulting app. So the way that it works is that the user is going to tap here for instructions. They are going to listen to those instructions, slide this button to come up with a number, and then tap on volcano facts. And based on the number, which would be the first most dangerous volcano, the second most, etc., then that particular fact would be displayed in the text box. So let's listen to the click here for instructions.
Discover America's most dangerous volcanoes. Slide the button to select a number from 1 to 10. Then tap the volcano facts button.
Okay, so those are the instructions, and I'll go over how those are implemented in just a moment. I wanted you to observe the slider, and please notice that as I am moving this slider, the leftmost track turns blue as I'm going over to the right, but then the rightmost track turns the magenta as I'm going over to the left, and also as I'm moving this slider, an integer from 1 to 10 is displayed inside of the label. When I rest on a number, and I've chosen 1, and I click on Volcano Facts.
The most dangerous volcano in America is the Kilauea volcano in Hawaii.
And when I select 2,
The second most dangerous volcano in America is Mount St. Helens volcano in the state of Washington.
okay, so you can see that I have implemented a slider and am acting upon the number generated inside the app to display the appropriate fact in the text box. So let's see how this is done. So the first thing that I want to point out to you is something I haven't covered with you thus far, and it's something called horizontal arrangement. And each of these horizontal arrangement blocks allow me to have an area that I can then manipulate the object inside of it. So when I speak about an object, I'm talking about the button or the slider or the label or the other button or the text box. Each one of them is in the horizontal arrangement box. There's also vertical arrangements, but I've just stacked these consecutively. So right now I'm only using horizontal arrangement. But what that allows me to do, and I'm going to click on this first horizontal arrangement, I am able to position whatever object is inside of that arrangement box so that I can either send it to the left, I can send it to the right, or I can center it. So that is a very convenient way to do those alignments. So in order to do that, all that you do is you come over to Layout, you drag over another horizontal arrangement block, and you select that in the components. And what I've done is I've stretched it all the way to the right with 315 pixels. So I've made it large. Okay, and then if I wanted to put an object inside of it, such as a button, I just drag it inside of that, and as you can see, it surrounds it. However, in order to arrange that button where I want it, if I want it in the middle, I click on center, there it goes into the center. But if I wanted to style the button, I have to click on that object itself. So here, instead of text for button 3, then I am going to put, here is button 3. Okay, So that is all that I need to do to position that. And as you can see from the new emulator, it just simulates what that button is, where a button is. However, this button won't do anything. I haven't coded it, so it won't do anything. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over how each of these components are coded. And just one thing that I want you to note is that I had to drop 2 text-to-speech components here. So if you wanted the information to be spoken instead of just observed, then you have to drop another text-to-speech. You just drop it in and it drops to the bottom, and then you will utilize that accordingly. So I have text-to-speech 1, 2, and 3. So if I wanted to associate text-to-speech for button 3, then I can use that one to say something different. All right, so now let's look at the instructions here, the click here for instructions. So all that is that it's a button, and I have the background color of blue. I have a font size of 14. I've left that as a default. And then I've changed the text to click here for instructions. This alignment is not referring to the alignment left to right in the app, in the screen itself. That is just inside of the button. So if I wanted to make it left or right, if I had smaller text and wanted to make it left or right into a bigger button, then I can do so. That's where you do it. So now let's just look at the code for this. So we're looking at the code for click here for instructions. And when I want to find out what's available for button 1, I click on button 1. And all that I wanted to do was I wanted to drag this component over to my program, because what I'm doing is I'm having the app listen for when the user clicks that button for instructions. When it's clicked, I'm calling my first text-to-speech. So I have my first text-to-speech. So what is available for text-to-speech? I just simply want to call it. And inside of that, I just simply wanted to say a specific text. So all that I did was I just clicked, I dragged over this, which is an empty text button, and that's where I put my discover. I was going to plop that in there. I did that by mistake. Discover America's most dangerous volcanoes. Slide the buttons to select number 1 to 10. All right, so that's how I coded that button. Let's go back to Designer. So now here is my slider, and sliders are interesting. They are going to have certain states, and they're going to have certain behaviors. Any object, now in here in MIT App Inventor they call it components, but they are called, in programming, they're called objects, because this is object-oriented programming. So you are associating certain states and behaviors. In object-oriented programming, you have states and behaviors. So the state of this slider is that it begins with a minimum value of 1 and a maximum value of 10, and it has a thumb position, that's that little center button, rests at 5 in the very beginning. So that's where it's going to be positioned on the screen. It also has in the left, when the number is dragged over toward the right, the left is going to shine this cyan color, and the right, when it's dragged over, when the button is dragged over to the left, it's going to shine magenta. So those are the states of the actual slider. But then when I slide it over, back and forth, the behavior is going to be that it's going to, based on my user interaction, it's going to either display the cyan to the left or the magenta to the right. But now what it also does is a behavior that I am going to capture, because what it's going to do is it's going to throw a number for me, and I have to capture that number because I want to act upon it. So in order to do that, I needed to create some variables for myself. So here I've initialized a global variable called slider value, and this is where all the variables live. And if you wanted to initialize another global variable, you just drag this over here. So I can initialize any variable that I want. But now the difference between a global and a local variable. A global variable is accessible to any part of the app. So if I wanted to use it in any of these procedures, I can do so. Position changed and button click. So I can use that variable to act upon it. That's why I make it global versus local. I can capture a value and put it into a variable locally inside of a procedure, but if I want that variable to be available to the next procedure, I make it a global variable. And you can think of global as, for instance, a county, and a local variable as a town. So inside of a town, you have your local variables that could be acted upon within that town. But if you wanted something to be acted upon in the county level that's available to all the towns, then you'd make it global. So that is an analogy to show you that the global variable can be used inside of any of those procedures. That's why I make it global. I want to make it available. Also, I've initialized a global variable so that I can have the facts. And I created this name, first volcano, second volcano, third volcano, fourth volcano, etc. So I have created that so that I can put my facts inside. So and I can utilize that in several places if I wanted to. In the global slider, getting back to the slider value, I've made it a default value of 5. The value is 5. The reason why I did that, and let's go back to the designer, is because I have made my default thumb position to be 5. So that when the user fires it up, if they don't move the slider at all, but then click the volcano facts, then the whole app will default to volcano 5. And it will display and speak that information. So in app writing, you have to anticipate what your user might or might not do. You cannot guarantee that they're going to slide that slider first. So I had to have a default value ready to use in case I needed to. So let's look at how I code that. So here I am going to say, now I click on my slider, and these are all of the things that are available to me to do with the slider. So as you can see, this one procedure here, when the slider is changed, when my user is sliding it back and forth, let me know. And when you let me know, I have to do something. I have to set my label, and my label is that guy right there, the 2. So when the user slides it back and forth, I am going to place what's called get thumb position. And get thumb position is inside of what I can do for my variable. And I am going to get my thumb position of my slider, and I'm going to place it inside of my text. So I am setting my label text to be that thumb position of the slider. That's my value. Here's the value that it throws. Do you see it? That's where I get the get thumb position. So this is the action that it's going to take. But this is important because a slider in App Inventor will give you a decimal number. It's going to give you 1.5, 2.5. So I don't want a 0.5. I wanted an integer. So what I asked it to do by saying ceiling, you have it round up to the nearest whole number. So that's how I got it to display an integer. I had to put that ceiling here. And also what I'm doing is I'm setting my variable, my global variable. I'm setting my global variable that I called slider variable. I can call it anything, but I'm setting it, just keep doing that, sorry. I'm setting it to the ceiling of the thumb position. I'm filling that variable. So I filled 2 things here. I filled the label and I filled my slider variable. The label is to show it what it is doing, my user what it's doing. The slider value is for me. I need to utilize that because then I need to display a certain text. Right, so that is what I did with the slider. So let's go back here. That's my slider. You already saw how I did my label. The label I didn't do much to. It can change its background color. I didn't want to change its size, but the text is just an informative text. And I'm putting in a 5 there so that I will let the user know that if they simply go to Volcano Facts and tap it, they're going to hear about number 5, the volcano number 5. That's all that that does. Let's go over to the Volcano Facts. So that's my button 2. So now let's discover what happens when that button is clicked. So that's button 2. Here, that's button 2. And here are all the things that can happen with button 2. So what I did was, when button 2 is clicked, and I have to listen because I don't know what the user is going to do. When this button is clicked, then I wanted to do this routine. And inside of that, I have an if statement. So I have an if, and I dragged over an if then else. Okay? Because I want to act upon 10 things. So I have to keep asking my app questions. Now you have to consider an if statement. An if statement is a question. An if statement is a question. And if the question that I'm evaluating is true, then it is going to do this routine here. If it is false, if it's not finding that slider value as a 1, it's going to ask another question. Is it 2? And then if that's true, it's going to do this code. If not, if that's false, it's going to go to the next one, etc. So what I'm saying right here when I dragged over an if else is that I am doing if my global slider value, and I can just drop this down. There's all sorts of values that I can do. But I want to examine slider value. I'm asking the computer a question. What is the value of slider value? If it's a 1, I want it to tell this text box, which is, let's go back to designer. Based on this number, I want to fill this text box. So let's go over to text box here. I've selected text box. And I've made it a height of 200 because I want it to be big. I want it to be tall because I might have a lot to say about the volcano. The width, I wanted to make it the width of the screen. That's 315. You have to click multi-line. Otherwise, if you don't, it won't wrap. Okay? And here I have placed a hint, and the hint is, that's what's shown in kind of a gray little sentence in the background, and what it's telling the user is that your fact will display here. If I wanted to put some initial text, I could put that initial text here, and that comes in a dark font. Your hint comes in a gray font. It's just saying your fact's going to come in here. So based on the number, I want to display the fact. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to the blocks, and I'm going to show you how that works. So here, what I'm doing is, if the value of the slider is 1, I want to set the text box. I only have one text box. I want to set the text box text to the global variable that I have created that contains the fact. So here is my first volcano fact. There it is. And I've made it a global variable. And this is what I want it to say. So all that I'm doing is I am getting the first volcano fact and I'm placing it inside of the text. Also, what I wanted to do is I wanted to speak it. I want to speak the text to speech. That's my text to speech 2 right here, because I use text to speech 1 for my first button. Okay, so text to speech 2. I'm going to keep using text to speech 2. But now I want it to speak the first volcano. Notice, else if it's 2. Here I'm setting it to the second volcano text. Else if it's 3. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on text box. I am going to now set it to the 3. Set text box, set text box 1 text. Okay, so I'm going to set text box 1 text. Click. And I am going to set its text, which is the wording inside of it. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to get, and I'm going to drop down. What should I get? I should get the text for my third volcano. Also, what I want to do is I am going to call text-to-speech 2, and the message that I want it to speak is the message that is inside of the third volcano. Okay, so now you can see that I've only coded 1 through 3. So let's run this. Here comes 3. Volcano facts.
The third most dangerous volcano in America is Mount Rainier volcano in the state of Washington.
Okay, I noticed I need a period there. I'm going to put that there. Let's see what happens when I put it up to 4. Nothing, because I haven't coded it. Okay, so let's discover how I code this. Now, it's interesting how you have to add the next if else if. Okay, because I have if, then, else if, then, else if, then. You code the next else if right here. See this little gear button? Now it's going to give you a little box, and it's showing you what your structure is thus far. I'm just going to drop this over here. Else if. So now I have another else if to work with. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to go to my math section, math. And, excuse me, I'm going to my logic. I click the logic button. And I'm just going to examine if something is equal. So if my variable, I'm going to get my slider value. If my slider value is equal to a number, what number? 4. If it's equal to a 4, then I want to set my text box. So I'm going to go down to my text box. I'm going to set my text box text. It's redundant, but it's necessary. Computers and the programs are very literal. I'm going to set the text box, which is my only text box. See? I'm going to set its text, which is the only thing I should at this point be setting. And then I am going to get my variable. And the variable that I'm going to get is the fourth volcano. I also want to do my text-to-speech for text 2. And I'm going to get the variable, fourth volcano. Okay, so now I've got the fourth. Now keep in mind, if you place the third volcano text in here, it's going to speak the third volcano. You have to be very careful that you're selecting the correct text to go into that field. That's a common mistake with beginner programmers. They forget to drop this down to the correct one of the section that they're in the else if. So that's a frequent error. So now let us play this. So now I am going to come over to 4, volcano.
The fourth most dangerous volcano in America is Mount volcano in Oregon.
Okay, So there it is. And then if I wanted to do another else if, which I do because I want to do 10, it's telling me, okay, inside of this box, another else if. Okay, so that's how you add it. You add it by dragging within that tiny little sub box. Okay, now it's giving me an error because I did not code this yet. Okay, and it doesn't like that. Okay, so else if, and then I drag over my logic. Excuse me, that's not the one I need. Else if, yes. If my get of my variable, my get slider value, drag over my math, five. But then I would have to do my fifth volcano. I have it. I have my fifth volcano. I'm going to set my text box. So I have to go down to my text box because what do I want to do to my text box? I want to set the text. There you go. And I want to set it to the variable. Excuse me, not set. Oh, darn. I want to get variables. Get. I want to get global variable fifth. And I want to go down to my text to speech. My text to speech 2. And I want to get my fifth variable, global fifth, making sure that I do fifth. Now I don't have that error anymore, you see? Okay, and it'll also show you your errors down here. Come over to my app inventor. I'm going to click on 5. Okay, so that is how you would implement buttons and sliders, and labels, and a text box. Okay, thank you.